This quilt is called Scrappy Trip Around the World. And Around the World, or Trip Around the World, is an old-fashioned pattern where it's mostly the pattern for the whole quilt. And it just starts in the center with one fabric, and each consecutive circle around the center, or patches around the center, are different fabrics. And it usually makes a big one. And this one, this setting is called Mini Trips Around the World. Like, there's a bunch of trips you take around the world. So anyway, that's a little history on that. And this is done scrappy, so there's no rhyme or reason to what it ends up looking like. And this quilt finishes at 70 by 94. And I put a border, I put 2 borders on this because I didn't want to have more scraps left over from the strips. This uses jelly roll strips, 2.5 inches times the width of fabric. The block finishes at 12 inches. We're going to make 35 blocks, and the setting is 5 across and 7 down. For the fabric, you need 105 assorted jelly roll strips, 2.5 inches times the width of fabric. And you'll need 1 yard of fabric for the first border and for the binding. This is what the block looks like, and we're going to make strip sets. Most of the time I've made mine all scrappy. I just haven't paid any attention to how these go together in the strip sets. Here is one of the strip sets, and I literally just grabbed out of my box or my bag the sets, and I put them together like this. So let me show you how we cut these jelly rolls. You'll take your jelly roll, and I'm going to lay it on the mat so I can use the mat, the numbers on the mat. And we're going to take our ruler and first cut off the selvage. You probably don't need to do this, but I like to cut up my selvages off. Then we're going to cut it. This is folded just like it came in the package. So it's folded. Those were the 2 selvages here, and here's the fold. So we're going to cut 2 pieces at once. And the first one is going to be 16 inches. So we'll cut this 16 inches. And then the next one, instead of using this as a scrap, we're going to cut this at 4.5 inches. That way we don't have more scraps for our scrap bin. We just have this left over. Now this makes 2 pieces for the border and 2 pieces for your strip set, if I can pick them up. So we're going to do that. And you're going to do that with 105 jelly roll strips, or 2.5 inch wide strips. And then we're going to take 6 strips and make, with your 16 inch strips, and make 35 strip sets. And I just, like I said, I just grabbed whatever and put them together in order. Now, if you want to have less chaos in your design, put the major fabric that will go along this diagonal. If you look in this block, this diagonal across here, it would be at the bottom of this strip set, because once we cut this up, we're going to call this the bottom. And if you do that, then you'll have that going through all the way through the diagonal of all of your blocks. Or you can just scrap them up and just don't even worry about it. So sew together your strip set, and on the back I press alternating direction. So this one is up, this one's down, and up. And the reason you press in alternate directions is when you sew these back together again, you can nest your seams and it's much easier to piece them. I like to use my Stripology ruler, and you just simply lay the ruler on and match up some of these lines. One of the lines across one of these seam lines. Make sure your 0 here has enough fabric, and your 15 inches here has enough fabric. And we're going to cut 2.5 inch segments. And then you lift up the ruler and take off the excess on the sides. And now you have 6 strips segments. And what we're going to do next, if you look in the instructions. The instructions, there'll be a link to my blog where you can download these instructions, and the link is in the description below the video. So now we cut the strip set into 6, and now we're going to start removing stitches and reattaching pieces of fabric. And it will probably make more sense if you can follow along and look at this diagram here on page 2. So the first one, and we work from the right to the left. So the first one we keep the same. The second one, we're going to take out the stitches between the first fabric and the second fabric. So now we have removed the stitches between the first and the second fabric. And we're going to take this top one, slide this up, and we're going to reattach it down here at the bottom. And you can see it always has this diagonal going in this direction, so you can check to make sure your fabrics are in order. And what I found is I had a lot of ripping out to do after I did this, because I would always put this in the wrong spot, and when you get in the middle, taking these apart in the middle, and I'd turn them around. So what I did, once I sewed it on here, I sewed these two together. That way I knew those were correct, and I can move on to the next one. So now I'll show you, I'm going to sew this here, back here, and then sew these two together, these two columns together. Now here you see the first two columns are sewn together, and I finger press toward the number 1 column, the first column. Now for the second one, we're going to take the first 2 fabrics, and between fabric 2 and fabric 3, we're going to remove those stitches. And move this up. So we've got our diagonal still going, and we'll put this one at the bottom, and we can check our diagonal to make sure we're fine. So I'm going to sew this piece here, then I'm going to sew this column to this column. And here we have the third column stitched onto the second column, and again I press towards column number 1. If we turn this over, we can see, because we pressed in alternate directions our strip set, that these seams nest nicely, and it's much easier to piece it that way. So now we're going to continue, and for this column, A, B, C, D, we're going to cut the threads between fabric 3 and 4. This is 1, 2, 3. We'll cut this thread here, and if you're not sure, you can put it up here and check what you're doing. So here's your diagonal, so you know you have to cut this fabric, cut this seam right here. So that goes there, and we sew this to the bottom here. And see, we almost sewed it wrong. Check your diagonal to make sure that it's going in the right direction. Now I'm going to finish the rest of these and show you, but just follow the instructions on this diagram here. And like I said, I found it easier to just do this strip and sew it onto the ones already sewn. At first I went through and did all the removing stitches and putting stitches back in, and I just confused everything, and I was ripping out almost more than I was putting back in. So I'm going to finish this and show you what this block looks like. Now here is the finished block, and you can see, because I had this darker fabric at the bottom of the strip set, we have this nice diagonal going through here. If that's the idea you want, this emphasizes the design, the sort of diamond design when you put them together in this setting. Here are some other blocks that don't have the big diagonal. This one has a lighter diagonal, and it's got the darker one right next to it. So this is how you can see that the blocks are a little bit different. And then here is another one that's really light, and it has light next to it. And this is just because I wasn't paying attention, and I didn't really want to pay attention to the strip sets I was putting together. So next thing you're going to do, after you make your 35 blocks, you're going to set them 5 across and 7 down. And there's a picture here on page 3 that here's the 5 across and then the 7 down. You don't have to put it in this setting. You can have all the diagonals going this way if you want, or stopping in the middle and going any kind of way that you want to put it together, but I just like this setting better. And next we're going to do add the border. After you sew the blocks together into the quilt top, you're going to add 2 borders. The first one is a 1-inch finished border. So I just use a dark color here to stop all the action going on in the center and to get ready for the action going on in the border. The instructions tell you to cut 2 at 84.5, and this is for border number 1, and you're going to sew the sides first and then cut 2 at 62.5 inches and sew those to the top and bottom. And I always press toward the border on this one. And the second border, you're going to sew 43 of your 2.5 inch by 4.5 inch pieces together along the long side like this. So 43 will be attached to the side border and 43 attached to the second side border. Then you're going to sew 35 together and sew those to the top and bottom. And for this one, I press towards the smaller border too. So here you can see it pressed, both of these are pressed toward the small border. And when you're done with that, you're done with your quilt. And I will be binding the quilt in the same fabric I used for the small border here, border number 1. If you have any pictures, if you do this quilt and you want to send pictures, and in the bottom of the instructions is an email. You can email me a picture. And I plan to have a subscribers show and tell where I can show pictures of subscribers and viewers of the video who have made the quilt. So thank you for watching.